So in the last video, I showed you how to work with the variables and parameters of the execute SQL task for OLEDB connections. In this video, I want to talk to you about ADO and ADO.NET. Most specifically, I want to talk to you about ADO.NET because, in the year 2010, how many people are developing ADO applications today? Zero? One? Is probably not that likely. So let's do this. Create a new package. And let's drag an execute SQL task onto the surface. Do the same thing we did last video where we selected from the human resources. Execute the stored procedure to update the human resources. So it's a little bit different. Coming over here, right here, we get to choose the different connection types, right? And it defaults to OLEDB. So all you do is you're going to change your connection. If you're using ADO, make yourself a new ADO connection. If you are using ADO.NET, you'll make a new ADO.NET connection. Okay? And it's picking up some previously done ones. So I'll do ADO.NET here. Connect up to the AdventureWorks 2008 database. And I want to do the same. I'm going to do the direct input for now. And so the same exact thing we did in the last video was exec update something. What was it? I forgot. I closed that script file out last time. And I'm actually going to save that. So this was our stored procedure that we did, update department. So I'm going to use the same update department at department ID, and I'll do what we did before, equals question mark at new name equals question mark. Remember, that's how we did this in the OLEDB. It doesn't work though for ADO.NET. With ADO.NET, you need to actually give these parameters names. Okay, so this is going to generate a syntax error in ADO.NET. So the parameter markers for ADO.NET begin with the @ sign. Just like a parameter or a variable in Transact SQL. So you will provide an @ sign and you will provide it with a name. And then you will reference that name when you define the parameter mapping side over here on that page. Let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to call this one @DEPTID, and I'm going to call this one @name. And I'm intentionally making these different. In the real world, I'd probably make them the exact same thing, but I am intentionally making these different so that you'll be able to see where each of these is defined. The syntax, in case you're not that familiar with SQL Server stored procedures, is the @stored proc param name equal, so you're assigning it to the ADO.NET param value. And I'm sorry that it kind of bleeds off and maybe gets a little bit unreadable there, but what I mean here is that this is the stored procedure parameter, and you are assigning it with the equality symbol, and the value that you are assigning it to is named @DEPTID. That's your parameterization, DEPTID, here within the execute SQL task. So I need to know this. I need to know that I named them name and department ID, because when I go to my parameter mapping and I assign my variables in this screen, that inevitably you have to always move everything around so you can actually see anything useful. I say for the user, oops, that was a different package. I need to create my variables, don't I? Sorry. Department ID is an int and it's 5, and It needs to be int 16 if you'll remember, so we can see. And it's done it again. Do you see that? There's that little bug that we saw in the last one. I can't change this value. And you watch, when I move over here, I bet it changes that to db null. Maybe flip here, come back, add a new one. This was new name, and it was a string. And we'll say, it hadn't done it yet, by the way. We'll say, I don't know, Scott. And there, it finally lets me do it. That's just weird. So 5. A little bug in the designer here. So in my execute SQL task, it has thankfully forgotten what I typed in. And I'll choose my connection. And dbo.update department at department ID equal department ID at new name equals at name. One thing I just thought of. Let me see if I can, I'm going to try this. I hope it works. It looks like it might. This left side, just because of how I've formatted it, the left side over here is static. Those names are in here because those are the parameter names of the stored procedure. I can't provide other names. I have to use those names or not use named parameters. The names on, oh man, the names over here, oh, that's way too much, right? These guys were arbitrary. I picked those names. I got to make that up. But I just have to remember when I get to the parameter, when I get to this screen, add, I have to remember their names. Department ID was a data type int 16. And what did I call it? What was that number I made up? Or the name? It was DEP ID. DEPT ID. And now the new name variable maps to the string name. Okay, so I've mapped up these numbers here, or these parameter names, with at DEPT ID and at name in my query. Does that make sense? You got that? Okay, and I'm done. As long as I'm using ADO.NET, that's going to work. We execute it. Prior to running this thing, I can't remember, it was like set in code or set in variable or something. I'm going to save this so that you have this, just by the way. Execute SQL 01. And so let's just take a look. And there it is. It set it to Scott. So which was the value of the variable, right? If we change this to Peter, run it again, run this again, then it's changed to Peter. So that's how you do parameterization in ADO.NET. If you are not going to be using ADO, you are safe to shut the video off. I'm not going to teach you anything different here. Okay, so I'm assuming that if you're watching right now, you have to deal with some old VB4, 5, 6 code, maybe an ASP page. You're having to deal with the old ADO connections instead of ADO.NET. If that's the case, it's just a little bit different. It's not going to be really that different from using the OLADB commands. What I would suggest to you is, actually let me change this and make this ADO.NET. ADO.NET. And I'll come back over to the toolbox and I will make an ADO version. Let me disable this guy. And I'm going to change my connection to ADO. And I'm going to make a new connection, localhost, and you're kind of looking at it going, gosh, this just looks so familiar. I mean, and it is. You're still using the SQL native client, whether you use ADO, ADO.NET, or OLADB. Doesn't matter. Make my connection, and now when I get into writing my SQL statement, it's going to be more like the the OLEDB command where I say dbo.update department, and I say department ID equal question mark, name equal question mark. So it's a little different. What I would suggest for those of you on ADO is going through the help, clicking on this little one right here, this little guy right there working with parameters, and coming down here and looking at the table, because the table does a good job of explaining how this works. So the parameter names are different though. Notice that you have to say param1. These are 1 based, so it's not a 0 based index like it was down here where it was 0, 1, 2. So I would just simply use this syntax here, param1, param2. And so when I go to my parameter mapping and I add, and I say that I want the department ID to be, it needs to be param1. Okay. And then the department name needs to be a string. This interface just drives you nuts here. So, gosh, I can't even remember my ADO data type. It's been so long. Param2. And that's really as simple as it is. So I'll change the variable value to set in ADO, and that's really all she wrote. And we get an error message. What did I do? Expects parameter, new name, problems with the query. What did I do? Oh, I see. If you remember, this was supposed to be new name, and I made it at name. Remember in the earlier I said, those are not changeable. They're set by the stored procedure. And that's it. And when we take a look here, over here, you can see it maps it up. So it's just, it's kind of weird that you have to remember these different syntaxes based on whatever driver or provider that you're using. But now you know.